Guys, there's three theories I want to go through. The theory of Freud, Jacques Lacan, and Carl Jung. So I'm actually going to start with Jacques Lacan's theory of the real, the whole, and the gaze. So Jacques Lacan talks about something which is called the real and the symbolic. He divides our life experiences into the symbolic, so the orderly world around us of rules and languages, and the real, the raw, the chaotic aspect of life that break through our day-to-day routines, okay? So let me give you an example. So imagine you have a routine. Your life is perfectly organized. You do whatever you want throughout the day. You wake up, you eat, you go to the gym, you work, and then you do something else in the evening. And that's your symbolic. But then a violent thunderstorm crashes in and happens. It turns your life upside down. That's the real that is intruding. For example, a thunderstorm happens, destroys your house, destroys your electricity. And that's just, it's gonna be intruding into your routine, into your symbolic. And for Gohan, the real is all the traumatic violence that he can't reconcile with his peaceful upbringing of loving life, loving nature, not wanting to fight. So when we see there's a clash, and each time he's forced to fight, he's re-exposed to that chaos, which he desperately wants to avoid. And then Lacan also says something else. He talks about a hole in reality. He talks about trauma as being a hole in your personal tapestry. So imagine your life, again, an example of your life. Just it's a beautiful painting or a beautiful cloth. And that's just a metaphor, but let's say a major traumatic event happens. It just, like we said, tears a hole in it. So every time you look at this hole, at this tapestry or at this painting, you're reminded of what happened. It's never the same as before. Yes, we can fix it, but you'll always see a hole through this tapestry. And you can think about it as as when you break a glass. Let's say you can put all the pieces together and you have your beautiful glass where you put water again. And let's say even it's perfect. You can't see the holes or the cracks in it, but you will know that this glass is an association with when you broke it, when you dropped it. And this is the trauma in Gohan's life, which is a hole in his reality. In Gohan's story, losing Piccolo and witnessing others dying, like his best friends, or witnessing the Cell Juniors hurting his friends, or witnessing Android 16 having his head crushed, trying to protect him or to make him, push him to transform him, finally use this potential, creates a massive tear in his reality. What does he do? He blames himself for everything. I wasn't strong enough to save them. I froze against Nappa. Krillin died because of me. And I'm just standing here watching the Cell Juniors just stare through my friends. And I'm not strong enough to do it even though everyone wants me to do it. That whole shapes his entire worldview. Combat equals tragedy, equals death, torture, friends dying. So he'll fight only when he must. And afterward, he tries to stitch his life back together by just returning to normalcy. I don't want no part of fighting anymore. That's horrible. I don't want it. I want nothing to it. I want to spar. I want to train a bit. But I don't want fighting to be part of my life like it is for Goku and Vegeta, who have dedicated their life to it. I want to focus on school, having a family with Videl, and minimizing any reminder of that hole in my reality. And lastly, Lacan introduces the concept of the gaze. G-A-Z-E. The feeling of being watched or judged. And you might ask, what is watching or judging Gohan? Well, imagine there's an invisible spotlight. And it just scrutinizes and analyzes everything that you do throughout the day or throughout your life, even your thoughts. You're going to say, I want to avoid those situations that invites this light. I don't want to be faced with this light or this spirit that is always judging me, especially if it harbors guilt. So Gohan is a prime example for this. He avoids regular training. He avoids tournaments because it places him under the gaze of who? His peers. His peers knows that he has this latent potential. Vegeta, Goku know that he's the strongest. He has the potential to be the strongest character, the strongest Saiyan, the strongest human, the strongest warrior, the strongest fighter. But they always come and say, wow, look at where you are now. What a shame. And they question his commitment. And deep inside, there's already the guilt of his past failures. So it's like, nah, I'm not stepping into this arena unless it's absolutely unavoidable. And then there's Jung. Jung talks about the shadow and the, I'm gonna butcher it, but it's called the individuation. So Carl Jung's ideas are a perfect illumination, guys, of Gohan's journey. And I'll tell you why. It's because Jung believed in the process of individuation, where you're able to integrate all the parts of your personality, including your shadow. And the shadow is basically the sword that you always keep sheathed. So you know your potential of doing evil. You know what you're able to do. And even though you would rather keep the side of you hidden, you don't want to show the side of you where you're angry, nervous. But this is what makes you individual. So, for example, think of your personality as a puzzle or a jigsaw puzzle, where you take one piece is missing, and that piece is a dark piece of anger, guilt, and fear. And you usually say, you hide that piece. Say, nah, it just reminds me of horrible experiences that I don't want to relive. I don't want to talk about this. Let's move on to a different subject. But for Gohan, that hidden piece is his Saiyan rage and his trauma of violence. And only, and this is what makes Gohan the most misunderstood character, and this is what makes Gohan the one with the most potential, is only when his loved ones are threatened, that threat to his loved one is a threat to his moral code. And that darker piece comes in and snaps into place. And there you go. The puzzle is complete. And what happened when the puzzle is complete? It unleashes that massive dormant power that he has. And it makes him a reluctant hero, far different from Vegeta and Goku, who just love combat. This is what makes Gohan's power, is that missing piece of his trauma. When he's faced with it, that darker piece comes in and completes the puzzle. And this is why Jung says that in the individuation, we have to integrate all the parts of our personality, including our shadow. And when Gohan does, he becomes the strongest character, which also makes him the most misunderstood character. Lastly, there's a Freudian perspective that really nails it home. Freud talks about traumatic childhood experiences. And he says that they often get buried in our unconscious. We don't want to live them anymore. Even if we don't remember them, we forgot about them, or even don't even know that they happened because they're childhood experiences. Do you even remember everything you've gone through at 4 years old? No, you don't. But even if you don't remember them perfectly, they will resurface, and they can resurface later in your life. And they will shape how you react to stress and danger. Like the example I gave before, imagine a child who falls off a bike, and he gets badly hurt. Years later, he sees a bike, or he sees his friends biking, it can trigger this fear. Even if the child doesn't recall or consciously recalls that when he biked, he broke his hand, broke his knee, he was hospitalized. In Gohan's case, he witnesses intense violence at 4 years old. At 5, he has his neck snapped. At 6, or maybe at the same age, his body is pierced. He witnesses death. He froze. He has that latent potential that he was not able to harbor, and he froze against Appa. His friends died. He froze against the Cell Juniors, suffering and torture. He saw his father dying against Raditz. Piccolo's sacrifice for him, and the loss of his friends. So those events become internalized and pushed away. Those internalized fears will resurface each time he faces combat. Each time. So you imagine you have all this trauma, and every single time you have to fight, it comes back. You would hate fighting. So then, Freud talks about something else called repetition compulsion. Freud describes repetition compulsion as something where people repeat the same painful patterns in a way to resolve them and try to resolve the old trauma that they had. So a perfect example for this is, think of someone who ate at a restaurant and he got food poisoning. Been there, done that. Yet he keeps going back to this restaurant to say, nah, it must have been a one-off. It must have been a one-off. There's no way that restaurant would have given me food poisoning. I love this food. And so he goes back there to fix that bad experience. And he's caught in a loop. Gohan cycle is very similar. And this is the cycle of his whole life. He trains, he fights, he wins, or someone else wins, then withdraws until the next big threat forces him to fight and relive those traumatic experiences again. It's as if he's unconsciously reenacting the same traumatic script, hoping this time, when he fights Cell Max, Boo, it will be different, hoping he will protect everyone without loss. But each fight reopens old wounds, tying more deeply to that fear. And then comes what glues everything together: Freud's superego and guilt. Freud's, and the last concept, is that the superego is more of a moral police we all have. For example, when you see a child or a dog getting kicked, you're like, oh man, this is very bad. And this moral police punishes you with guilt if you feel you haven't done your duty. You're gonna be like, oh man, I should have helped him. Oh man, I should have given money to this homeless person. Oh man, I should have done something. I should have stood up to the bully. So you get the picture, but let's say there's an extremely strict teacher in your head. And that teacher or that voice in your head never lets you forget about a mistake you did. You carry that guilt for years, and it shapes what you do. That voice controls you and shapes you. For Gohan, his superego, his voice, constantly reminds him, I wasn't strong enough to protect him before. I failed Piccolo, I failed Krillin, and I failed my own dad. So whenever a threat appears, like Majin Buu, or Frieza, or Frieza's return when he became Golden Frieza, Gohan pushes himself to fight out of moral duty, for protection, not for the love of combat. But once the battle is over, the cycle begins and he retreats again to avoid reliving those traumatic memories and that suffocating guilt. And you can see it. There's many times where Gohan is exposed and communicates this trauma openly. Gohan was scared of Buu hatching, and he actually tried to prevent this traumatic experience. He actually tried to get ahead of it, but he misunderstood himself, and he was not able to stop Majin Buu from exploding because he was like, he wasn't strong enough. He just wasn't strong enough. But there's a very interesting quote that it is easily missed in the anime. The Supreme Kai, this god, tells Gohan, we need you alive right when Buu is about to hatch. He's in that cocoon. He's going to hatch. There's no doubt about it. We need you alive. We need to retreat. It's not a time to be a hero. And Gohan answers, but there's people I care about. And so Gohan says, we need you. Supreme Kai says, we need you alive. We need you now. And Gohan answers, this time around, I'm not just gonna stand by and watch all my friends get hurt. And he has this immediate power up. But notice what he said. He said, and this time around, I'm not gonna witness all my friends get hurt. This is a portraying of his traumatic experiences against the Cell Juniors and the Frieza saga and the Saiyan saga. So this is not something that we just made up. It's a thing Gohan himself said. This train, fight, retire loop is really the repetition compulsion that is highlighted by Freud. He's not really fighting the opponents. He's more fighting himself. He's fighting his true struggles of fighting his own trauma, guilt, and fear of each time he enters battle. And you can notice that every time he enters battle, the primary enemy is not the enemy itself, but it's his own internal psychological scars. He's always wrestling with the trauma and guilt and fear. And fans always see, oh, well, he's gonna have this immediate power up. Oh, it's bad writing. No, this is how Gohan works. This is how he always was. And each new crisis just awakens the same traumatic guilt, which gives him the power up. It forces him to confront that real that we talked about. And he powers up and then retreats. And each new threat acts as a new awakening. First, he has to re-experience his guilt of his past failures to protect. And that's why he hates fighting. He doesn't like fighting. He has to confront those. So this is why Gohan is misunderstood. We have to reframe this wasted potential. This wasted potential criticism is a gross misunderstanding of Gohan's withdrawals. Their responses to trauma. He attempts to create a safe and conflict-free life.